And joining me now is John Carreyrou. John, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with what Theranos was selling. What was the game-changing technology that the company was pitching?
So Elizabeth claimed to have invented technology that could run the full range of laboratory tests, which, if you speak to experts, can range from a few hundred tests to a few thousand, from just a drop of blood or two pricked from the finger, and to return results to doctors and patients very quickly and at a fraction of the cost of other laboratories. This would have been game-changing technology because no one had been able to run that many tests off a tiny sample of blood.
And it was revolutionary because down the line, eventually Walgreens and Safeway signed on as well and became clients. Your book, though, lays out in great detail all the red flags along the way about Theranos, right? Deliberately misleading test results, constant technical problems that delayed an initial rollout of a technology that was supposed to be in the final stages, the failure by CEO Elizabeth Holmes to produce contracts that she said she had with pharmaceutical companies. Yet it still attracted this all-star cast of investors, including Tim Draper, Larry Ellison. The board consisted of people like Secretary of State George Shultz and General James Mattis. How were so many people and companies duped along the way?
Well, what Elizabeth was really adept at it was winning the support of someone older, experienced, who had a great reputation, and then leveraging that association to get her own credibility. And the first person she did that with was her Stanford engineering professor, Channing Robertson. Then a few years into the life of Theranos, she met Don Lucas, the venture capitalist who groomed Larry Ellison and helped him bring Oracle Corporation public in the mid-'80s. And then in 2011, she met George Shultz, the famous former Secretary of State, who crafted the Reagan administration's foreign policy and who many still credit with winning the Cold War. And what many people don't know about George Shultz is that he's passionate about science. His house is right off the Stanford campus. And when he met Elizabeth, he was wowed with her claims about what her technology could do and quickly agreed to join her board and then introduced her to his buddies at the Hoover Institution, which is a think tank housed on the Stanford campus. And that's how she came to meet the likes of Henry Kissinger and Sam Nunn and Bill Frist, Bill Perry, et cetera. And they soon joined the board, too.
And was timing also a factor in all this? Because right around 2010, we see Facebook rising. We see Twitter being very popular. Investors were basically looking for the next unicorn startup, and there's Theranos.
Right. And, you know, money was gushing into the Valley because, in large part, we'd had the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and the Federal Reserve had lowered interest rates. And so traditional investments like bonds no longer returned good money, and so investors went looking for higher returns elsewhere.
Silicon Valley became the gold rush.
The Valley became the gold rush, and one of the companies that seemed so promising was Theranos. And in late 2013, early 2014, the company achieved a valuation of more than $9 billion. And Elizabeth Holmes had managed to keep half of the equity, so she was worth almost $5 billion. And this fulfilled this yearning there was for the first female tech founder who became a billionaire. There had been other women in the Valley who had achieved, you know, fame and wealth. Sheryl Sandberg, who's the number 2 at Facebook, Marissa Mayer, but they hadn't created their own companies. Elizabeth Holmes was going to be the first tech founder who was a woman and who achieved great riches.
So do you think she was intentionally trying to mislead investors, or was she consumed by her own ambitions and thought she could make this happen?
I mean, it's a mixture of both. This is not a Madoff long con. You know, Madoff essentially decided in the late 80s that he was no longer really investing money and built a Ponzi scheme. Elizabeth Holmes, when she dropped out of Stanford, had a vision and really set about creating a company and hiring people to make that vision happen, but along the way encountered setbacks, as entrepreneurs do, and refused to admit the reality of those setbacks and continued to overpromise to investors. And it got to a point where the gap between her promises and what she said she had achieved technologically and what the reality of the technology was got so enormous that by the time they went live with the fingerstick blood tests in Walgreens stores in the fall of 2013, it had become a massive fraud.
So is there a possibility that that there could be criminal charges stemming from this? Because the SEC, of course, charged her with massive fraud. She agreed to pay a $500,000 fine. Are there criminal investigations going on right now, though?
Right. There's an investigation spearheaded by the U.S. Attorney's Office in San Francisco that's been going on since December of 2015. So we're now 2.5 years into it. And my sources tell me that that investigation is very active and very advanced, and it may well result in criminal indictments of Elizabeth Holmes and her ex-boyfriend, who was the number 2 of the company, Sunny Balwani.
And we just have a little bit of time remaining, but you say in your book that this is the biggest corporate fraud since Enron. What do you think is the biggest lesson to learn from this?
Well, Enron was a bigger company, certainly, and more money was involved. It was the 7th largest U.S. company at the time. Theranos is obviously just a startup, albeit a startup that attracted nearly $1 billion in investing, $1 billion that went poof. But the most egregious part of the Theranos scandal is the way the company was cavalier about putting patients in harm's way. And I, in the course of my reporting, came across more than a dozen cases of patients who had very questionable test results and who had health scares, and whether or not anyone was harmed is still an open question. And I think the big lesson is that you can't employ the Silicon Valley vaporware, fake it till you make it playbook in the realm of medicine. When you're
there are lives at stake.
Lives at stake.
Yeah. All right, John Carreyrou, author of Bad Blood, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.